I remember the first time money was being sent to me. I was 15, turning 16. And at the time, I was away from home at boarding school in Auckland, New Zealand. So while that seemed like an independent point in my life of having lived away from home at that age, I was still actually very much tied back to home, at least financially. So receiving money for my 16th birthday was a treat, but it didn't end there. I continued to receive money every few months, and for 6 years while I was living in Auckland and studying. This was to help with things like groceries, extracurricular activities, and so forth. Being financially supported while studying was a privilege, and I was indeed very lucky to have only school to focus on. However, it was not until I returned home after finishing undergrad studies at university that I still experienced this receiving of money, but on a different scale. This receiving of money that I have been referring to is termed remittances. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, shared an article with a definition of remittances that I quite like, and states that it's typically transfers from one person to another person or household, and targeted to specific needs of the recipients, and thus tend to reduce poverty. I guess, in other words, or another way to look at it, is that it is a gift. This money that we receive is a gift. We receive money from loved ones, families, friends, or even classmates, colleagues, or acquaintances abroad for various purposes and reasons. But in Tonga, it mostly exists as a lifeline for some homes or to fund or finance cultural and family obligations. Earlier this year, I lost a first cousin of mine, so suddenly. And in this current global pandemic, it also meant that his own mother and sisters could not come home to attend the funeral. So I remember being asked to go to MoneyGram, which is one of the money transfer operators here in Tonga, to receive money, which would help pay for the funeral arrangements. And I remember so vividly the standard set of questions that they asked of me when I went up to the counter, the teller. And before receiving my money, she asked, "Can I have your name, please, and a reference number? Who is the sender? What is your relationship?" And a question that always kind of makes me feel like is an intrusive, or perhaps, I guess, slightly an interesting question, is that what is the purpose of the money? What is the purpose of these funds being sent to you? And then, of course, they ask for ID. So what is the purpose of this money? What is the purpose of these funds? Why are you receiving this money? And these are questions we just take lightly, I guess because we know it's definitely for something specific, like a funeral, birthday, a wedding, reunion, and so forth. But even when you provide those specific reasons, the teller or operator just notes it down on the description of funds as gift or family support. So it's placed in this broad category. But when we break it down, and if you have experienced receiving remittances yourself, you will know that the underlying or driving force behind it all is our culture, our families. This is all wonderful, and it helps our country truly in so many ways. I mean, the National Reserve Bank reported and continues to report in its remittances report, which is published every month, that remittance receipts is the highest source of foreign exchange inflow for the Tongan economy. So it gives you an idea of just how significant this inflow of money is. But if we think about how we use it, is it how we want to continue using it? Should our economy, should our people continue to rely on remittances? I assume some of these questions can be quite sensitive because it has been known and rather evident in our country of how, I guess not detrimental, but how negative remittances can also be. I myself have family and friends who rely on it, and remittances in studies that are publicly available have shown that it does not only encourage unemployment, but can retain it, and I guess to some extent encourage it. Because why would you work if you received enough money to survive on or to live on from family and relatives abroad? So remittances on one hand has, I guess, then contributed to some of our people being lazy, reliant, dependent. And it has definitely taken very capable people who could be in the workforce to remain at home instead. But that is just one side of the story, right? Since migration abroad happened to countries like the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, it has meant that a diaspora exists, and this diaspora will continue to grow in different ways, with Tongans taking up opportunities in other countries or just moving abroad for better lives. It also means that they can help their own family members and friends here too, with remittances. But also, while they are there, some of them have left their parents behind here in the country, their children, their siblings, or their wife or husband. I mean, look at the growing numbers of seasonal workers that we are sending to Australia and New Zealand. And of course, they leave behind their communities, their churches. So for us Tongans, and you know what I mean when I say we have an obligation first and foremost to our families and our culture. We are the very first people to look after our own parents, our own siblings, our own children, our villages, communities, churches, and our schools that we used to attend and that we love. So remittances, although noted as a gift by a money transfer operator, is also one of the ways our people compensate our own people who have to stay home and look after our parents, who look after our children, who fulfill our other obligations to our homes and our country, and in ways I believe can't be measured. And it brings me back to my own experiences of how remittances played a very significant role in my life growing up since 15. I think about how much it meant so much to me then, and how my own parents wanted me to focus on what was important at the time. Even up to 14 years later, for me, and even experiencing remittances in a different way, it still means a lot. It meant a beautiful send-off for a first cousin of mine. It meant food and water for all the families and friends who came to the funeral. It meant receiving money to help build a new library for Tonga's best high school. So I think about that, and I think also about how this is how I experience it, and I believe it must be the same for others and other families too. And whether it is on a larger scale or less, but the money we receive feeds and it builds. It feeds not only our families, but our villages, communities, and it builds. We build new houses, new church buildings, new community halls, and so much more. This is how important remittances is to us. So there you have it. We all rely on remittances in one way or another, directly or indirectly, to some extent, to a large extent. But where to now? And with a global pandemic, do we see remittances declining? Will it decline in the future, or will there be more? Will we continue to rely on it? How much more will it grow by or decline by? And how can we be productive with the money we receive? Is remittances being invested? Wait, should remittances be invested? There are many questions we can ask, and we can come up with countless answers. Also, some questions we do not know the answer to or how to answer it. Simply because in the future, anything can happen, anything can change. With many uncertainties and unknowns ahead, we just can't say for sure how we will continue to receive money, or if we will continue to receive money, more or less. But I think at this point in time, one thing is for sure. We are already investing with remittances, and we probably don't intend for it, but we really are. We invest in our families, we invest in our culture, and that, in a sense, is already investing in the future. Thank you.